Hey man, when a woman comes back after walking away from you, your first reaction probably won't be logical, it'll be emotional. You'll see her name on your phone and suddenly remember everything. The good mornings, the late night conversations, the places you went together, the future you once imagined. And if you spent months wishing she'd return, brother, that message can feel like the answer you've been waiting for. But this is exactly when you need clarity the most. Someone coming back doesn't automatically mean the reasons they left have disappeared. Missing you is an emotion. Wanting access to you again is an emotion. Neither one proves that the relationship would be healthier the second time around. Because the first question shouldn't be, does she still love me? The first question should be, what actually changed? Maybe she says she misses you. Fine. Why? What has she understood now that she didn't understand before? If trust was broken, what rebuilt her ability to protect it? If she repeatedly disrespected you, what changed in her behavior? If communication destroyed the relationship, what has she learned about communicating differently? Don't become so excited about hearing, "I made a mistake," that you forget to ask what makes the mistake less likely to happen again. Regret can happen overnight. Change usually takes longer, and sometimes people return because reality after the breakup wasn't what they expected. Maybe freedom initially felt exciting. Maybe she believed moving on would be easy. Maybe she thought she'd immediately find something better suited to her. Then weeks or months pass and life becomes ordinary again. Dating isn't as exciting as imagined. New people don't automatically create deeper connections. Loneliness appears. Suddenly the familiarity she walked away from starts looking different. That's human. Men do this too. But understand something. Discovering that life without you is uncomfortable isn't automatically the same as discovering that she is capable of building a better relationship with you. And that's why you shouldn't let your ego make the decision either. Because there's a part of you that may love the fact that she returned. You remember how powerless you felt when she left? Maybe you begged. Maybe you couldn't sleep. Maybe you watched her move forward while you were still trying to understand what happened. Now she's standing at your door again, and suddenly the power feels reversed. Your ego whispers, "See? She finally realized what she lost." Be careful. Validation can make you reopen doors that healing taught you to close. Her return may feel like proof of your worth, but your worth was never supposed to depend on whether she eventually came back. And this is where memory becomes dangerous, because the mind doesn't replay relationships fairly. After enough time passes, the emotional intensity of the bad moments often fades. You remember the vacation, but forget the argument afterward. You remember how she held you, but forget how uncertain you constantly felt. You remember laughing together, but forget the nights you couldn't understand where you stood. That's nostalgia. It edits the movie. So before you even consider going back, remember the whole relationship, not just the highlight reel your loneliness wants to show you. Ask yourself honestly, who was I becoming inside that relationship? Was I peaceful? Was I respected? Was I growing? Or was I constantly trying to save something that kept hurting me? Because sometimes what you miss isn't actually her. You miss familiarity. You miss having someone to message. You miss being known by somebody who understood your routines, jokes, history, and habits. Starting over with somebody new feels exhausting because now everything has to be rebuilt from zero. So when your ex returns, familiarity feels incredibly comfortable. But comfort isn't always evidence that something belongs in your future. Sometimes it's simply evidence that something occupied a large part of your past. Don't confuse "this feels familiar" with "this is healthy for me." And let's say she genuinely apologizes. Brother, hear her out if you want to. You don't need to become cruel simply because somebody hurt you, but understand the difference between an apology and evidence. "I'm sorry," good. "I miss you," understandable. "I've changed," maybe. But what does that change look like? If someone couldn't take accountability before, can they do it now without excuses? If they repeatedly crossed boundaries, did they finally understand why those boundaries mattered? Brother, words can reopen emotion very quickly. Behavior is what tells you whether reopening the relationship makes sense. And sometimes the answer should still be no, even when she genuinely changed. That's something people rarely say. Not every apology requires reconciliation. Not every person who becomes better deserves another relationship with the person they hurt. Brother, forgiveness and access are two different things. You can forgive somebody completely and still decide that your life is healthier without reopening that chapter. You don't owe permanent resentment, but you don't owe permanent availability either. Maybe you've finally rebuilt your peace. Maybe you've become someone different. Maybe going backward would require reopening wounds you've spent months closing. You're allowed to protect that progress. And if she only returns because she senses you're moving on, be especially careful. Maybe she sees you becoming happier, maybe you're dating again, maybe you're no longer checking on her. Suddenly the messages begin. I've been thinking about you. I miss what we had. Can we talk? Those feelings might be genuine, but timing still matters. Sometimes losing access creates urgency that wasn't present, while access was guaranteed. The question isn't whether she feels something now. The question is whether those feelings represent sustainable change or simply the emotional shock of realizing you may no longer be waiting. So when a woman comes back, don't automatically accept her just because the version of you who was abandoned once desperately wanted this moment. Let the man you became afterward make the decision. Listen if you need closure. Ask what changed if you're considering anything. Look at behavior rather than nostalgia. Remember why the relationship ended. And understand that missing each other doesn't erase incompatibility, broken trust, or repeated patterns. Sometimes people genuinely deserve another chance. Sometimes they don't. But either way, brother, her return shouldn't automatically become your surrender. She made a decision when she left. You spent time learning how to live without her. Don't throw away that clarity simply because she finally knocked on a door you once begged her not to close. A wolf is mad when his man knocked on Poe's man, and this is where you need to separate her return from your old desire to be chosen. When she left, maybe the deepest wound wasn't even losing the relationship, it was feeling rejected. You wondered what you lacked. You compared yourself to whoever came next. You replayed conversations looking for the moment. Everything changed. Then months later, she returns, and suddenly that old wound receives exactly what it wanted. Validation. She chose me again. Brother, that feeling can be intoxicating, but validation is a terrible reason to restart a relationship. Before saying yes, ask yourself something uncomfortable. If she had never rejected me in the first place, knowing everything I know about her now, would I still choose this relationship? Your answer may surprise you. Because sometimes you weren't actually fighting to keep the woman, you were fighting to reverse the rejection. There's a difference. Your ego couldn't tolerate being the person who was left, so getting her back became symbolic. If she returned, then maybe you weren't replaceable. Maybe you won? But relationships aren't competitions where reconciliation changes the final score. She can come back and the original problems can still be sitting exactly where you left them. And if you accept her simply because being chosen again repairs your pride, you may wake up 3 months later realizing you successfully recovered the relationship you had already learned wasn't good for you. And pay close attention to why now. Why did she return today instead of 3 months ago? Don't interrogate her like a detective, but don't ignore context either. Maybe enough time passed for genuine reflection. Maybe therapy, maturity, or life experience changed her perspective. That's possible, but maybe something else ended. Maybe loneliness appeared. Maybe the attention she expected elsewhere disappeared. Maybe she simply had a difficult weekend and started romanticizing the past. Human beings often reach backward when the present becomes uncomfortable. That doesn't automatically make her dishonest. But temporary discomfort can create powerful emotions that feel permanent in the moment. You need enough patience to discover which one you're dealing with, and that's why you don't have to make a decision during the first emotional conversation. She says she wants you back, and suddenly you're expected to answer immediately? No. You can listen, you can acknowledge what she said, then take time to think. If her intentions are genuine, your need for clarity shouldn't threaten them. In fact, somebody who has truly reflected will usually understand why you can't simply erase everything overnight. Urgency should never replace evidence. If she's demanding an immediate answer because she's afraid you'll move on, that's her discomfort to manage. You don't need to make a life-changing emotional decision simply to relieve somebody else's anxiety, because trust doesn't regenerate the moment someone says, "I made a mistake." Suppose she broke your trust before leaving. Maybe there was dishonesty. Maybe promises were repeatedly broken. Maybe you spent months questioning what was real. Now she returns and wants everything restored immediately. That's not how trust works. Trust is accumulated evidence. If it took months or years to build and repeated behavior destroyed it, one conversation can't recreate it. And if you know deep down that you'd spend the entire second relationship checking, questioning, doubting, and waiting for history to repeat itself, ask whether reconciliation would actually create love or simply turn you into a permanent investigator. And don't ignore what happened to you after she left. Maybe you became stronger, but maybe you also became more guarded. Maybe something inside you changed permanently. That's worth acknowledging. You could genuinely forgive her and still realize that the version of yourself capable of trusting that relationship no longer exists. People sometimes assume that if both partners still have feelings, they should automatically try again, but feelings are only one ingredient. You also need trust, compatibility, emotional safety, timing, and willingness to rebuild. Love can survive, while the relationship itself becomes impossible to recreate. And this is where boundaries become extremely important. If you decide to hear her out, don't immediately restore every privilege of the old relationship. Don't go from months of separation to texting all day, sleeping together, making future plans, and behaving like nothing happened after one conversation. That's how emotion outruns judgment. Slow everything down, let reality catch up. If you're considering reconciliation, observe whether the person standing in front of you is actually different from the person you remember, or simply temporarily more motivated because she fears losing you permanently. Because anybody can behave differently for a week. When the stakes suddenly feel high, sustainable change reveals itself when the urgency fades. Can she communicate differently after the emotional reunion is over? Can she take accountability without turning every discussion into blame? Can both of you address the original problems without pretending they never happened? And equally important, have you changed where you needed to change? Don't create a story where she was responsible for everything simply because she was the one who returned. If your behavior contributed to the breakdown, a second attempt requires your growth too. Otherwise, you're putting two familiar people back into the same environment and hoping nostalgia somehow produces a different ending. And sometimes, after examining everything carefully, you'll realize something uncomfortable. You still love her, but you don't want her back. Those two truths can exist together. Love doesn't automatically mean compatibility. Missing someone doesn't automatically mean reconciliation. You can appreciate what you shared, genuinely wish her well, and still know that your future needs to continue somewhere else. That's maturity. You don't have to turn her into a terrible person to justify moving on. Sometimes two people simply reach a point where returning would cost more peace than the relationship could realistically give back. So if she comes back, remember this. Don't ask only whether she deserves another chance. Ask whether the relationship deserves another chance. That's a much better question. What ended it? What materially changed? Can trust realistically return? Are both people taking responsibility? Would you be choosing her because you genuinely believe something healthier can be built, or because the rejected version of you finally received the validation he'd been craving? Maybe after answering those questions, you decide reconciliation is worth exploring. Maybe you close the door respectfully, but whatever you choose, brother, don't let one emotional "I miss you" erase months of lessons. Someone returning is only an invitation to make another decision. It isn't an obligation to give them the same place in your life again. And there's another trap that catches men when she comes back. They mistake emotional intensity for proof of transformation. She may cry. She may tell you she hasn't stopped thinking about you. She may describe every moment she realized she made a mistake. And because you've never seen her this emotionally vulnerable before, you think, this has to be real. Her emotions may absolutely be real, but brother, real emotion and permanent change are two different things. Someone can genuinely regret losing you tonight and still fall back into the same habits 3 months later. Emotion tells you how strongly someone feels in a moment. Character is revealed by what they consistently do after that moment passes. And that's why you shouldn't become hypnotized by the apology itself. Listen to what she's actually taking responsibility for. There's a difference between "I'm sorry everything happened" and "I understand exactly what I did, why it hurt you, and what I should have handled differently." Vague regret is easy because it doesn't require someone to confront their behavior specifically. Genuine accountability is uncomfortable. It doesn't immediately hide behind excuses or turn the conversation into a list of everything you did wrong. That doesn't mean you were perfect. You probably weren't. But if she's returning while still unable to acknowledge her own contribution to the breakup, what exactly are you rebuilding? And another thing you need to watch is whether she misses you or simply misses what you provided. Maybe you were the person she called when life became difficult. Maybe you gave her stability, attention, emotional support, practical help, affection, or consistency. Once you're gone, those benefits disappear too. Naturally, somebody can miss them. But missing the comfort of a relationship isn't necessarily the same as being prepared for the responsibilities of one. So listen carefully. Is everything about what she lost? I miss how you treated me. I miss talking to you. I miss having you there. Or is there also recognition of what she would need to give differently if the two of you tried again? Because relationships aren't restored by one person saying, I realized how good you were to me. That may sound flattering, but you're not looking for somebody who merely recognizes your usefulness. You're looking for reciprocity. Can she show up for you? Can she protect your trust? Can she communicate when things become difficult instead of reaching for the exit? And can you do those things for her? That's the standard. A second relationship shouldn't simply recreate the first relationship with one person, temporarily feeling more grateful. It should be built differently, or eventually the same pressures will expose the same cracks. And this is where time becomes your friend. You don't need to reject her immediately just to prove you're strong, and you don't need to accept her immediately because you're afraid she'll disappear again. Observe. If the change is genuine, it doesn't need to be proven in 48 hours. Let conversations happen. Let difficult subjects come up. Notice whether accountability remains. Once she realizes you're not instantly taking her back, that's important. Sometimes somebody behaves perfectly while they're trying to regain access, but the moment they feel secure again, the old behavior returns. Consistency after certainty is much more revealing than intensity during pursuit. And be especially careful if she becomes frustrated because you're not immediately giving her the old relationship back. Think about what that tells you. She left, time passed, and now she returns, expecting trust, intimacy, attention, and emotional access to reset instantly. But your hesitation isn't punishment, it's a natural consequence of what happened. Someone who genuinely understands the damage should also understand why rebuilding requires patience. If she says, if you really loved me, you'd just trust me again, that's not rebuilding trust. That's asking you to ignore your experience so she doesn't have to tolerate the discomfort of earning it. And don't let physical attraction make the decision for you either. You see her again after months apart and everything familiar comes rushing back. Her voice, her face, the chemistry. Suddenly your rational questions feel less important because your body remembers the relationship faster than your mind remembers why it ended. That's normal, but chemistry didn't necessarily save the relationship the first time. Attraction can reopen a door that wisdom knows should remain closed. Give yourself enough time for the emotional rush of seeing her again to settle before making promises about what happens next. And suppose she tells you she dated someone else while you were apart. Brother, don't immediately turn the conversation into a competition with another man. The important question isn't whether he was better or worse than you. It's what she learned about herself, the relationship, and why she's returning now. If your boundary is that you don't want to restart after certain circumstances, you're allowed to have that boundary. But don't torture yourself, demanding every detail simply so your imagination can punish you afterward. Ask only what you genuinely need in order to make an informed decision about your own future. And here's the question most men avoid because they're afraid of the answer. If you accept her again, and she leaves again 6 months from now, will you regret ignoring what you already knew? Brother, you're never going to get a guarantee. People can change genuinely and relationships can still fail. But you should at least be able to look at the evidence and say you made a thoughtful decision rather than an emotional one. If every instinct is warning you that nothing fundamental changed, don't silence yourself because being wanted again feels good. Sometimes your hesitation isn't bitterness. Sometimes it's experience trying to protect you from repeating a lesson you already paid heavily to learn. So, when she comes back, don't make your decision based on how satisfying the return feels. Look beyond the reunion and imagine the ordinary relationship 6 months later. When the excitement of getting each other back disappears, what's different? How will disagreements be handled differently? Why should trust be stronger? What happens when boredom returns? What happens when one of you feels uncertain again? If you don't have meaningful answers, you're not necessarily beginning a new relationship. You may simply be restarting the old one from the beginning. And sometimes the strongest answer isn't revenge, anger, or making her beg. It's calmly recognizing that somebody can genuinely regret losing you, while you genuinely decide that losing you was still the last decision they get to make about your future. And there's a point where you have to ask yourself whether taking her back would actually be an act of love or an act of fear. Maybe you finally rebuilt your life, you're sleeping normally again, your confidence returned, you stopped checking what she's doing. Then she comes back, and suddenly you're terrified that saying no means losing your one chance to have her again. But brother, listen to that thinking. You're making a decision from scarcity. You're assuming this person is your only opportunity for love, connection, or happiness. She isn't. You had a life before her, you built one after her, and you can build one beyond her. Don't let the fear that nobody else will understand you make you return to something you've already outgrown, because sometimes the relationship you miss doesn't even exist anymore. You're remembering two people from another period of life. Maybe you were both younger, maybe circumstances were different, maybe the relationship belonged to a version of you that no longer exists. So when she comes back saying, let's go back to how things were, ask yourself whether you even want that, because if how things were eventually produced the breakup, recreating it isn't necessarily a victory. If reconciliation ever makes sense, it shouldn't be about returning to the past. It would need to be two changed people building something new. And if neither person fundamentally changed, nostalgia is simply inviting you to repeat history. And this is why the phrase, "I've changed," should never be enough by itself. Everyone can say it. The better question is, what changed you? What happened during the time apart? What did she understand? What did she do differently? Maybe she genuinely spent months reflecting on patterns she previously couldn't see. That's possible, but if the entire explanation is, "I realized I miss you," that's not necessarily transformation. Missing someone tells you something about attachment. Change tells you something about character. Don't confuse the pain of losing access with the growth required to handle that access differently if it's restored. And don't forget, you should be asking those questions about yourself too. Maybe you spent the breakup telling yourself she destroyed everything, but distance revealed things you needed to improve as well. Perhaps you became complacent. Maybe you communicated badly. Maybe insecurity made you controlling. Maybe you stopped appreciating the relationship long before it ended. If you haven't confronted your own patterns, then even if she changed completely, you could still recreate the old relationship yourself. Reconciliation isn't one guilty person proving themselves to one innocent person. If both people contributed to an unhealthy dynamic, both need to become capable of something different. But there are also situations where you don't need another experiment. If betrayal was repeated, if disrespect became normal, if she repeatedly left and returned whenever convenient, or if the relationship consistently destroyed your peace, you are allowed to decide you've gathered enough evidence. You don't need to reopen the door just to discover whether the same fire burns you twice. People deserve opportunities to grow, but that doesn't mean you personally have to become the testing ground for their growth. She can become an incredible person afterward. You can genuinely hope she does. And you can still decide that her future growth belongs in somebody else's future. And that's an important distinction, brother. Forgiveness doesn't restore eligibility. You can stop being angry. You can understand why she behaved the way she did. You can even accept a sincere apology and appreciate that she finally recognizes the damage. None of those things automatically mean, let's try again. Sometimes forgiveness simply means you no longer want to carry resentment. You release the emotional debt without reopening the relationship. That's not cruelty. In fact, sometimes it's the cleanest ending possible. I don't hate you. I don't need revenge. I simply don't want to rebuild what we had. And if she truly changed, she should eventually be capable of respecting that answer too. Think about it. Genuine accountability includes accepting that your actions can create consequences. You don't get to reverse whenever you're finally ready. She can apologize sincerely, and you can sincerely decline reconciliation. Both things can be true. If she immediately becomes angry, guilt trips you, threatens you, or says you're heartless because you won't take her back, pay attention. Someone genuinely taking responsibility understands that forgiveness cannot be demanded. A second chance is something another person freely chooses, not something regret automatically earns. And suppose you do say no, don't turn that moment into revenge. Don't make her beg just so you can enjoy rejecting her. Don't list every person who wanted you after she left. Don't say, "See, I told you you'd regret losing me." What does that prove? If you've genuinely healed, you don't need to humiliate somebody to demonstrate it. Be clear, be respectful. Maybe you say that you appreciate the apology, but you've moved forward and don't believe restarting the relationship would be right for you. Then leave it there. The strongest boundary usually doesn't need an audience. Because the real victory isn't seeing her face when she realizes she can't have you back. The real victory happens later, when you're alone and you still feel peaceful about the decision. There's no adrenaline, nobody is watching, your ego isn't receiving applause. and you realize you chose based on what was healthiest for your future rather than what felt most satisfying in the moment. Maybe part of you still misses her. Maybe saying no actually hurt. That's okay. A painful decision can still be the correct decision. Emotional discomfort isn't proof that you should reverse course. So when she comes back, remember what the title really means. Don't accept her doesn't mean every ex who returns must automatically be rejected. It means don't automatically accept her simply because she returned. Don't let nostalgia decide. Don't let loneliness decide. Don't let your ego decide, because being wanted again finally feels like justice. Look at what happened, what changed, what hasn't changed, and who you've become since then. And if your conclusion is that the chapter needs to remain closed, close it without hatred. You don't need her to suffer. You don't need her next relationship to fail. You don't even need her to understand your decision. Sometimes, brother, the final stage of moving on is realizing that the apology you once desperately wanted can finally arrive, and you can appreciate it without needing the relationship that came with it.